Good morning, everyone. We could. I'm going to call this meeting to order. We're going to stand. We do pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jake.
Keisha Johnner,
Here.
Jim Mueller,
Here.
Steve McCombs. Here.
I'll entertain a motion for today's special agenda.
So Luke.
Second. McCombs. Aye. Mueller.
Aye.
John.
On to business. This morning, everyone, we are here regarding the salary study. This is a special board and supervisor meeting. We did feel that it was important to just set this aside and have a meeting of its own. Before I turn it over to Beth, who was with the Austin Peters group, I just want to start with saying, first of all, thank you. Thank you to the committee. If you'll recall, the Board of Supervisors last spring when we were doing the budget, we discussed, I think in probably every meeting with everyone, we need to look at doing a salary study. It is time. It's imperative. So the board was fully supportive. We formed a committee, and that committee then went out and sought people to do salary studies. Well, I feel that the committee did an excellent job in picking who they chose. We did have some hiccups in the beginning. And they did their diligence because they didn't feel that they were getting the qualified, so we went back out to bid. And this is how we got the Austin Peters group. Beth has a wealth of knowledge, over 25 years of working with cities and counties. And that meant a lot to us because when the board was speaking with during budget session, we wanted to make sure everyone we had somebody that knew how to deal with cities and counties, first off. And then second of all, somebody that could help us, since we as Marion County have never done this before. We're embarking on something that is rather, what's new to us. Some of you may have come from a place where you had steps, but that's where we wanted as a board. We wanted to be able to have the study so the employees could see what is the next steps, where is my next goal, and what is that outcome. Beth has been working diligently for the last 4 months. You department heads, I'm sure you've received multiple emails, and Beth has communicated with you as employees, also in regarding getting information, getting the data, and wanting to know what your job entails. So we are here today because with all that work, Beth has also, and her team has also went out and did marketing studies, whether that was through other cities and counties, and your department heads know about those. Those were all spoke about. Everybody was fully aware, and then they went and did market data. I want you to know that we all know that salary is very personal. Budget time, what does it come down to? It comes down to salaries, really. And it becomes very personal. And I get that. And you as department heads and electeds, you want to take care of your people. Well, one of the promises we made was going backwards. I made sure of that. Second of all, we made sure that when we looked at electeds, we went per code. So those that are tied to an elected, those deputies, they're not in this study. The sheriff also has some lieutenants that's tied to us. They're not in this study. They're held separate. They will go back through the compensation board like we had in the past. Right? Another big thing I want everybody to know is the data in which the Austin Peters group has done. HR or myself or the board has not seen that raw data. That's why we hired them. We did not manipulate that data. We hired them to come to us and say, this is what the data is saying. There's been many great communications, and I am very thankful for their approach that Beth has done and being able to make sure that everybody understands, hey, this is the next step. So we're now here to see one of the big pieces of the puzzle. And I want to welcome Beth, and I want to thank her for her time. She flew in, and I asked her to present to us in public. I thought it was imperative so that everybody could physically see and meet Beth, but also those online. I wanted you to meet her, and we thank you, Beth, and I'm going to turn it over to you, and I believe you have a PowerPoint that was presented by yourself. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you. Is this turned on?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Just want to make sure. And as I said to Lisa when I came in, when you're short like I am, you have to make sure that the microphone fits the situation. So good morning. It's nice to be here. Nice to see so many employees and department heads and elected officials here as well. So let me make sure that this works properly. Maybe. There we go. Just a little bit of background. I think it's important to kind of back up a little bit and talk about the study. I won't focus much attention on myself. You did a very nice introduction. Thank you. I will say that the Austin Peters Group, we've been in existence for 28 years. It's hard to believe. It does feel like yesterday. We used to do a lot more private pay work as well with the private sector. But my heart was always with local government, cities and counties. I also served as a local elected official. So I know what it feels like to sit over there and interact with employees and department heads, and the importance that you place on your employees and the value, as you talked about, is very important to everyone in the organization. So I want to say that we've worked here throughout the Midwest. I enjoy the Midwest. I'm a Kansas person, born in Missouri, so it feels like home. One thing about Iowa that's very unique, that is more difficult when you get into a state like Colorado, where I currently live, people were much more helpful in Iowa. And I will just say that flat out. The counties, the cities, the organizations that I talk to, they are much more willing to work with you and be a part of the process and share with you than I'm traditionally used to. And I will say, you didn't mention this part, everyone responded to the salary survey, the salary and benefit survey. And I have to chalk that up to Iowa. That's just how it's done, and that's how people help one another. So we appreciate that very much. And just a little bit more about me. I did go to a land-grant university as well, and originally thought I'd be a planner, but somehow found myself working in local government and making my way into human resources. And I always was a data nerd, so salary surveys fit my personality pretty well. The project that we were invited to participate with, and I'm going to refer to your report as well. So I'm on page 3 of your copy that you have. What I'd like to do is focus just kind of walking through the scope of the study. I think that's important, especially for the audience and people that are listening in. This was a very big project, and I will say that the employee committee, is that what they call themselves? Yes.
Yeah. The salary study committee, yep.
The salary study committee, they had a very broad scope, and the RFP that was let out was quite well done. I could see, now that I know the players in the room, I could see a lot of hands in that RFP in terms of goals that people wanted to see accomplished. And I would say that it was very comprehensive. So studies like this take time. And so we began in August, and now here we are in December. We promised we'd have the pay piece done by December. That was a goal that the committee had. And here we are, ready to deliver at least more information about phase 1. I do want to say the classification and compensation piece is the largest part of the study. The goal was to develop pay grades by job titles, to also develop a pay step system. And I don't know how many people have either been on a step system in the past or are familiar with them, but that was the purpose and the intention outlined in the RFP. The second component was a review of Fair Labor Standards Act. I'm really grateful that Lisa does know her way around FLSA as well. That was very helpful. We reviewed a dozen positions. We have a few that will go on to your outside attorney, and I know that was particularly of interest to you in terms of making sure that that was done. The third component is really when you are transitioning to a new system, there will need to be some policy guidance and some adjustments and changes. And so I have been working with Lisa, drafting those policy pieces so that we can have a smooth transition to a new system. What I valued the most is that then Lisa's been able to compare and look at what has Marion County done in the past, how do policies fit in, and I expect there'll be more questions as we move down the road in the spring with that as well. Finally, important to you all is what kind of investment will this require of the Board of Supervisors and Marion County? What is the cost? And there is a cost in terms of bringing pay up to the market. So we'll talk about that as well. And then finally, after the first of the year, we'll be working on job descriptions. Those are about ready to go out to department heads and elected officials after the first of the year. They'll give us feedback. They need to take a look at those. They need to review those, give us feedback and send those back to us so that we can get those over to Human Resources. So that is the scope of the study. That's on page 3 of your report. So let's talk a little bit about a step system. When I was first asked, I think, Chris, maybe we had a phone call, I can't remember. We were discussing, he was on the committee, we were discussing step systems and, you know, really the pros and cons and those kind of things. Moving to a step system is a transition for Marion County based on the way practices have been done in the past. So I talked at length with both Lisa and Supervisor Janer about what are those advantages? What do people like about step systems, both from an employer standpoint and an employee standpoint? And so step systems, how many people in the room have been familiar, been on a step system at some time in your career? Raise your hands. Okay, we've got quite a few people familiar with that. One of the advantages to a step pay plan is that it does provide predictability and transparency. It's known to everyone what those steps look like. It is transparent in terms of what the next move would be for an employee. Employees, now I happen to be married to someone who was on a step system his entire career. He would announce to me what his adjustment would be next year. It really didn't matter to me as much, but to him it was very important to know where his career was headed. And so step systems do offer that to employees. The other piece is that employees, and I would say probably department heads and electeds, also feel like there's some equity in the system among employees. And that's very important in terms of reducing favoritism or bias or those kind of things. From a budgeting standpoint, you know what your budget will look like. You will be able to look at a step system and you'll say, okay, I know what the adjustment will be for Beth. Next year, I can budget that. And I can make predictable budgeting for my department. Hopefully Jake will say it's easier to administer in terms of payroll. The other thing that it offers employees, and I think this is probably more important, is that in terms of career planning, this piece about knowing where you're headed is what a step system does offer to employees. And we find that, you know, that also increases retention. People feel more comfortable. They know where the pay plan is headed. And there's a longevity system built into a step system as well. So those are the advantages. I won't dwell on it too long, but I do want to move on and talk about the steps in the project because I want to make people aware especially employees who are sitting in the room, what we've done so far to get to this point, and this would be on page 4 of your report that you have. To begin the project, one of the biggest pieces that we engage in is there were employee questionnaires that were filled out by all the employees. And this reminds me how challenging this part was. So I need to pause for a moment and thank Lisa for all the background work that she's done providing support to the project. And I remember I said to you, okay, are you ready for like 1 million questionnaires and following up with every department? And she said, I'm ready. And so she was a great help, as well as Renee in her office, making sure that we stayed organized. The employees filled out a questionnaire that focused on what their job duties were, and that's very critical in terms of updating job descriptions. When I go out to the market, I can take a look at that survey. I can look at what they put down for education, knowledge, certifications, and make sure that when we're doing the market piece that there's a match there, an apple to an apple match. So that's critical, the employee questionnaire that was filled out. We also ask, this is really important too, we only started doing this maybe 10 years ago, asking our department heads and electeds who they consider their peers. And so your department heads and elected officials helped with that. I think their knowledge is really critical. They know who's structured like them in terms of size. They know who's organized in the way that they might be here in Marion County. So that was critical information that we collected from them too. They also got to tell us what's happening in your workforce. What are some challenges that are going to be occurring or currently occurring? So I was here in September to meet with them, to talk about all their position questionnaires and positions and ask a lot of questions. And they were very helpful. Each one of them provided good information. The positions then were evaluated based on internal equity, and those are on page 4 of your report. And I'll list those here in a few minutes. Department heads and elected officials know what those are, and we'll come back to that in a few minutes. But that was done before we went to look at the market data. So steps in the project continued here. We went out to the market. We surveyed everyone. I took a look at my inbox for Marion County, and I believe I have 200 communications, something like that, regarding the salary survey piece. It's a lot of detail because people will send you information and there are a lot of questions. And let me just back up. The survey that they received had a summary of your positions. And so we included things like, do they supervise, or those type of things, or what are their duties? So that the person on the other end, a Lisa or a department head filling it out, had an idea of how to match the position, okay? And then they would also tell us, is this a match or is it not a match? Do we have a fit here? So that was very helpful when those friendly Iowans were filling out their survey and sending that back to us. They were able to take a look at whether or not they did have a match. As I said before, we had 20 respondents. Everyone participated in the survey. And I, again, thank them for that. We will send out information to them eventually about the results once we're finished with that piece. So after we put the pay data together with the internal and the market piece, we decided to focus on 2 choices for the Board of Supervisors. I found it as an elected official, I like options, and I'm sure you do too. So 2 options are presented to the Board of Supervisors, and those are at the average of the market, or the market average for your positions, and the 60th percentile. I will say, we'll talk a little bit about the 60th percentile and how important I feel it is and why you may want to consider that as an option. But first of all, for those of you kind of watching online or wondering, well, who participated in the survey? Here's a list. of all the counties that participated. And again, you've got a list of 11 here that participated along with your cities. You had your Marion County major cities here with Knoxville and Pella, and then Indianola and Oskaloosa. We also collected, and this was your department heads helped me with this, who would be present in terms of your state and federal pay competitiveness. And so we have some state data in here as well. Finally, at the bottom, you'll see something that says Economic Research Institute. That is a data set that we purchase. It's important because it picks up the private sector. And that's critical for many of your jobs in terms of, I can think of road and bridge or roads or facilities or finance, or there are many, many occupational positions that compete with the private sector. So we have that data in here as well. The development of pay ranges and pay grades. And this is on page 5 of your report. So we have the market average and we have the 60th percentile of the market. The pay grades, and I'll talk a little bit about this, and I'm sure some questions will come up by you all about this. The pay grades are established 5% apart from one another. That's fairly typical in a STEP program. We analyzed positions separately for the general workforce and law enforcement. It's very important, based on my experience and knowledge, that law enforcement stand on their own for a variety of reasons. They want to compete head to head with law enforcement. They don't want to be mixed in with other occupations. And so it's really critical that we make sure that they are compared to their peers directly, and that we have a separate system for them, mainly because of how dynamic the pay has been in that occupation for the last, I would say, 15 to 20 years. So we have 2 separate systems, one for general employees and one for law enforcement, 2 different structures. There are more pay grades in the general employee group because there are more positions, more occupations. You have a lot of part-time employees, but you also go to the highest level with the department head, or for example, your county engineer. On the law enforcement side, you've already mentioned that there are a few, the chief deputy and the lieutenants are not in the system, but you have several occupations there as well. That includes everything from your administrative to your corrections, to your communications officers, to your deputies, to your sergeants. Each pay grade has steps in those pay grades, and those steps are 2.5% apart from one another. So that's very critical, 2.5% apart. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. But first of all, the 60th percentile, I want to visit about this because when we talk about being competitive in terms of pay, the average of the market can be a great place to be. We want to be there at a minimum, is how I perceive it. But the 60th percentile is a place in the market where if you lined up 10 employers, you would see that 4 are ahead of you and 6 they pay less than you. And why is the 60th percentile important? It's because as an employer, you want to be more competitive. You want to not overpay, but you certainly want to attract and recruit and retain people. And so that's critical in terms of pay. So 4 people will pay more than you, 6 will pay less. It's a competitive position to be in that I hope that the board will consider. And we've provided that as an option. So you're able to recruit better. It helps retain employees. And I think it's budget-wise also, it's a strategic place to be in. So the next slide, and this would be on page, let's see, 7 of your report. And you also see at the back of your report is table 2 that lists all the positions by the average of the market and the 60th percentile, along with the pay grades. I would call table 2 the bread and butter of the report in terms of what things look like. But first of all, let's talk about pay ranges and grades. I mentioned earlier about internal equity. I remember when I interviewed Chris, I kind of interviewed Chris and he interviewed me when we first talked on the employee committee. And I said to him, what kind of challenges have you seen in the past? I said, is internal equity an issue? And he said, absolutely. Just like every organization, internal equity needs to be taken into account. And I said, okay, I just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page and that I should be proposing this because some organizations kind of want to skip past this, which is kind of foundational to a pay study. So internal equity, the department heads and elected officials, we did a training together when I was here in September, and their eyes might have glazed over. I really don't know. We did some mock-up exercises. There are 7 components that make this important. We have supervision, and those of you that supervise who are in the audience know how important it is. Supervision is very difficult to carry out, and it can be challenging at times. So that's one. Knowledge and experience. We look beyond what would be a degree or education. When you're in county government, your education and experience generally starts right here. You don't go to school to become an auditor. You work in the auditor's office. You work your way through the system. You gain the knowledge that you need here in the courthouse or in roads or many other departments. So knowledge and experience is very important. Budgeting is another item listed here. Decision making. What kind of decisions does a position have to make? What are they involved with? And public contact. This is critical when we talk about public government. This is this is everything that we do. And I will say that we might think of roads as being an exempt from public contact, but if they were in the room right now and I asked your equipment operators, how many times does a farmer stop you to talk to you about your road? They would say every day. So public contact's important across government, no matter what position we are in. It happens to vary by job though. Working conditions and physical conditions and requirements are important as well. That's internal equity. So we take that component and then we match that with the market. Once we get all the positions organized by internal equity, then we are looking at the market data to put together the pay grades. And so those become important in terms of the outcome or the output. The general employee pay plan has 32 pay grades and 15 salary steps. Intentionally, and I'll talk a little bit about this, and law enforcement, let me just go to them real quickly, has 14 pay grades and 14 salary steps. Their market is a little more narrow. It also means they tend to start a little higher and end a little lower, slightly. That's why they have 14 steps or 14 grades, excuse me. What I was going to say about those steps, though, in general, there will be 2.5% between the steps. So that's important to understand. What does that mean for employees? And I'm sure that's what people who are listening are wondering. The policies that I proposed to Lisa and Keisha involve with good performance, people move to the next step. And that would be on an annual basis. And then how does the system stay intact or keep up with the market? There would be an annual cost of living adjustment to the whole system. So employees would see both a cost of living adjustment and a step adjustment. Does that make sense? Those of you that are familiar with steps probably are familiar with that. One question, I thought this was really good in terms of questions that department heads had for me was, does this mean that employees will go back to step 1? No, that would be pretty counterproductive to move everybody back to step 1. And you're smiling, I know it Can you imagine how many people you'd have in here? Yeah. Anyway, but how do we put people on a step? And so Keisha mentioned this at the very start, and this is really critical for employees to hear. Um, I don't remember which meeting this was, but she said, absolutely, we are not going backwards. This is critical.
Beth,
Go
can
ahead.
you elaborate on, have you worked with other municipalities that have gone backwards?
Well, backwards is a term that I have.
Reduced.
Yes, I have. So back in, I would call it pre-pandemic days, quite frankly, pay was looked at very differently. We kind of have a new, I think, attitude towards pay and retaining people. Yes, the answer is yes. I worked with municipalities who said, well, if they're paid at the top, then we need to freeze their pay. That's how it should be. That's not how it is today. After the pandemic, we saw an attitude of we have to work harder to retain people, and we have to work harder to make sure that there is a career path for them as well. And so when I say go backwards, what we did was we made sure that no employee would receive less than a 2% adjustment. I will say we are talking about a very teeny tiny amount of people here. There are 150 people in the study. Most people are going to see an adjustment of 3 or 4 or 5%. And there are only a small group that would be affected by something that would be less than 2.5%. So how do we find the step for an employee? We look at current pay. As we just said, we don't want people sliding backwards. That's incredibly counterproductive. And you'd have another group of people in here, wouldn't you? Yes. So we want to make sure that employees are taken care of and that they're valued. The next piece is we want to look at what is the adjustment? What did the market say this position would be paid at? That's critical. This is the whole point of the study, lining up with the market. We also want to give people credit for their time in their position, because we know if they walk out the door and go somewhere else, they're going to be able to get credit by another employer. Their employer will say, hey, you have 5 years of experience. That's valuable to me. And so we gave credit for time and position as well, and looked at the market adjustment. Then we look at what is the closest step when we put those numbers together. What's the closest step for that employee, so that we prevent them from falling below a 2% increase. And so that's how people will be placed on a step. I will say I've worked with much harsher employers who they found it okay to have people go back in terms of step progress or something. I don't think you want that. You want your employees to feel valued, and you want to make sure that they're taken care of so that they stay with you for a long time. I'm sure the sheriff could tell stories about how hard it is to train and retrain people. It's incredibly expensive. And there are other departments that have the same issue. It takes a long time. And so we don't want that. We want to make sure that you take care of your employees that you have. So transitioning, this is a transition to the step plan. And during that transition, so the compensation model that we've talked about is based on internal equity and the market competition to create the pay grades and steps. Employees, like I said, will be placed on the closest step. We want to make sure there's a minimum increase of a 2%. And like I said, this only impacts a very tiny group of people. But that's important to know. So building a step system that reflects an employee career path is critical here. We intentionally extended the steps near the top so that employees could see what a career path would look like. I think that's really important to give people a direction about what things will look like down the road. And so that was done intentionally. We want to make sure that there's guidance on step movement. That would be part of the policy piece. You want to reward performance. You want to make sure when you do a performance review that that person will get that step adjustment. And finally, stability for financial planning for the county is critical. On page 10 of your report, there's a summary of findings. And I want to let you know what the cost is, and I hope that I'm not going over. Do I have it? Okay, no time limit? Okay, thank you. On page 10, there are two options in terms of financial investment. At the average of the market, this would cost the county approximately $429,500. I know that's a lot of money for the county. I think those adjustments and increases it does cost to transition to a step system. As I said to Lisa early on, be ready because people don't magically fall on a step. You have to find that closest step to place that person or position on, and it costs some money. Option 2 would be at the 60th percentile, $467,537. Again, no employee will receive a pay decrease, and no employee will receive less than a 2% adjustment. In fact, most employees, and I'll give you the numbers here in a moment for percentage increases, what they look like. I think that's really critical as you transition to a step system, that you have the confidence of your employees to do that. Finding number 2 here is annually you will have the duty and responsibility of moving that pay system according to a cost of living index. I provided several samples of what that would look like and how you would make that adjustment on an annual basis. You won't have to make any future adjustments until 2027. Okay, so we're planning for 2026, July 1st at the moment. Another finding from the study that I want to share with you is many counties had, this wasn't all about pay, it's also about benefits, and that's critical. Many counties had moved to bring back a lot of health coverage that had been lost during the Great Recession, essentially is when people began peeling it back. And we found that Marion County is in really good shape in terms of their health insurance. There might be a few tweaks for the family side of things, but we were pleased to see that. I will be the first person to confess that doesn't mean it's a review of the quality of the health insurance. It simply tells us where you fit among your peers in terms of coverage and cost. Vacation leave, the one thing that I did find is that Marion County does lag somewhat in the group of employees that have been here more than 5 years, 5 to 10. I think that Lisa told me, I think this has to do with the way leave is done at 6 years, right? Yeah.
It's the difference
So,
between the 5
yeah.
and 6.
So if I looked at 6 years, then you're probably right in line with your peers. But the 5-year mark, you lagged a little bit. And that's something that could be worked on. The other piece would be, I want to say a little bit about leave, and this is in your report. The other piece about leave is we find this is almost taken over pay in terms of employee importance. So surveys that are being done are showing how critical leave is to employees. And that really happened once the pandemic hit, both for annual leave and sick leave, in terms of attitudes and how to adjust or adapt for that. You will need to take a look at longevity. I know there are some components of longevity for Marion County in roads and in law enforcement. If you're on a step system, generally longevity is not a separate longevity, then there's a way to transition away from that. If employees know that the step system is a replacement for longevity and they see where they're headed year after year, then that really becomes a longevity incentive for employees.
Just a real quick question.
Yes.
So your recommendation would be is that we look at benefit time, i.e. vacation, sick time, those things, in totality,
Yes.
and then compare that against the market.
Right.
And then make adjustments between potentially vacation time and sick time. and
They're
everything.
tiny
Bring it-
adjustments, yes,
Bring it back into the realm would be normally
Aligned.
expected,
yes,
aligned with other peers.
aligned with your
And
peers.
potentially at that 60% percentile, as you suggest.
Yes, yes,
I just want to make sure that everybody understands, we're looking at, it's not all in one direction. Potentially, it is rebalancing things in
Well,
totality in that.
yeah, and for the most part, I found Marion County was doing quite well. You know, in terms of benefits, just minor adjustments here and there, and they're spelled out in the report of items to look at. The total here, I think, is important. Again, I mentioned these at the market average. What's the investment that the county would have to make? And that's 429,000, almost 500. The 60th percentile goes up to 467,537. But for employees, the average increase that they would see under the market average would be 4.7%. Under the 60th percentile, that goes up slightly to 5.1%. And that would be for I can't even believe I'm saying these dates, that's for 2026. Strange, doesn't it, that the new year is right around the corner? But that's what it averaged out to be for full-time employees and what those adjustments would look like. I thought you might be interested as Board of Supervisors. Well, Beth, what did the market say in terms of how we compared? Marion County does not have pay range minimums or maximums currently, but we are able to compare what does your actual pay or average pay look like compared to the market. This is on page 11 of your report. So when we looked at general employees, we were able to compare by averaging all the positions together and compare that to the market at both the average and 60th percentile. How do we look? Well, we're slightly behind in terms of the general employee group in terms of averaging that data together. It doesn't mean that some positions might not be competing well. They could be, but we can see that we have a little growth to go in terms of making sure all positions are competing better. And that's on page 11. So Marion County, what do we look like when we compare ourselves to the market? Here's what it looks like for general positions, lagging the market, which is why you see the adjustments. When I looked at law enforcement, the picture got a little brighter. I have to really applaud the sheriff. I think he's done good things in terms of maintaining or keeping up with pay. I know it's been a priority for Marion County. They are pretty much dead even with their market at the moment. I think it's always important to say at the moment because this is a point in time. And that doesn't mean there aren't positions there that need adjusted, because there are, I can tell you from the research I've done. So we do have adjustments that need to be made across the board for both groups. But I think I'll stop and take questions that you all have and see what I can answer.
Board, I've been working with that. I would say not as much as Lisa has been, but we've been having meetings weekly, maybe twice a week. It all just depends, right? Emails oftentimes, and I know you have not had that opportunity. So I think it is important that if there's questions that you have, they have a chance to ask her. I would just like to go back really quick, Beth, and regarding I, as the chair, did say to Beth, I think it's important that we don't go backwards.
Right.
Right. And she was able to help us with that vision. I did say it. Now, the board's hearing that for the first time. Okay. And I want the board to be able to, communicate with how they feel about that. But I think for longevity, I think of morale was a huge issue for me. I know that we've spoke about this, and I spoke about this about a year ago, that I wanted it to be a team effort. And guys, it's a team effort. And then we have another compartment of this. We as electeds are elected by the constituents. So you as employees And department heads, you know, we have this fine balance as elected. We want to honor, because what is the number one thing we're hearing? I'm sure you all are hearing the same thing: property taxes. How is your salary paid? By property taxes. So there's a balance. You know, we can't go really high, but we can't go low, because morale is an issue. Everybody wants to be able to pick up that phone or walk into the courthouse or walk into one of our annexes and be able to say, I still want that service. And so that's imperative to me. So I really hope that when this all comes out and the study is complete, that everybody sees that we as a board are trying to do the best that we can, but we don't have, and a quote from Steve, we don't have an endless amount of money. We can't. Not when rock prices have gone up 20%, 17%, another 7%. I mean, they're crazy. What it costs to buy a vehicle anymore? I know the sheriff can tell you that. The cost of a vehicle has gone up substantially, even if you bought one on your own. It's crazy. And those costs are affected by us. So we're trying to find that balance. But again, I know when you talk about salary, it's such a personal thing. But we are really, as a board, trying to do our diligence to honor all the employees. Or do you have any questions?
Beth, I really appreciate all the work everybody has done on this. I agree, it's very important that employees be paid a fair wage, and so we can retain employees. But I'm old school. We have other expenses, just like Keisha said. We have to be very aware in the future on how we're gonna balance these funds. So we have a limited amount of money to work with. And I'd be the first one to say I'd like to pay everybody the top. I mean, I'm really kind of pleased with these numbers. It's showing exactly where we're at this point in time. I mean,
yeah, Beth didn't have any idea what she could have been getting into,
I had
right?
no idea.
Yeah.
And so I'm pleased as well that the 60th percentile doesn't cost a lot more. I can tell you from my experience, the past, especially since the pandemic, we have much smaller local government groups that are having to invest, $300,000-400,000 to bring people up to the average of the market. So I think there's a lot of good things that have been happening in Marion County in terms of how you've handled pay. And this is just tweaking, I think, what you have.
the numbers are probably kind of in line with what we would look at for salary increases. I mean, in the future anyway. I mean, I like the idea of being a transparent, so that employees know where they're headed, what they're dealing with. I like that idea. I really do.
And the pay system and the pay grades are important. So then they know. So it's not just a blanket. Everybody is the same. You know, it's that they're on a pay grade and this is the minimum and the maximum.
But then again, I'd like to remind everybody, just me being old school, just me being me. We have a finite amount of money. If we cannot continue to provide services for the taxpayer, everybody's job, in my opinion, is a moot point. I mean, if we can't get from point A to point B, our jobs don't mean anything.
I'd just like to say thank you for all the analysis, and clearly this has been very well thought out, very well presented. And I'd also like to thank everybody that participated in the survey, because this was all stuff that was done on top of your regular duties, and the thoughtful responses and everything that you guys provided. That's what we need to base our decisions on. As Steve and Keisha said, there's a big difference between what we want to do sometimes and what we can do. So we go into this with our eyes wide open and say, yeah, we do want to do this, but we're limited by our ability. We can't print cash. We don't have a printing press in the back room that Marion County can produce script in order to pay people. So we have limitations to what we can do.
I also like the prospect or the implication or the definition that we need to look at things in totality from a total benefit standpoint. And I know that's something that, as an employee, and I'm an employee too of the county, we look at pay, and usually we just look at that and say, oh, you know what, my pay isn't, you know, what other counties may be paying or whatever. But we also need to look at the benefit package in totality, which includes the health insurance component. We may be paying a lot more than other counties or businesses health insurance, either individually or for family. So I think we need to make sure that we're looking at all of those things in totality, as well as sick time and vacation time. I know there have been a lot of discussions with different organizations, whether they're private organizations or government organizations, of changing the pools so that they're not vacation versus sick, they're benefit time. That way you can look at it in totality, where you have one pool of hours that's benefit time. Whether you use that for vacation or use that for sick time, irrelevant to us. You're gonna get paid the same. But I think that's something that we should also look at in the future going forward. I'm encouraged, quite frankly, that, as you said, the 50 percentile is not a huge number. It shows to me, my first year of service here in the county, that we've been responsible and taking care of our employees. Not that we don't have some deficiencies, because there are clearly some things that need to change. But we're not way off the scale of treating some people poorly and some people, you know, out there just living a large life. So I think it's important to put that in perspective too. I think that also what I would say is just what we want to do and what we can do may not always match up. But I'm also a big proponent. People that used to work for me way back when in my prior career is I'm a big supporter of crawl, walk, run. We know where we want to get to. Let's take the appropriate steps that we need to do in order to get there. Sometimes that requires patience on everybody's part, but we all know that that's where we're going. And I think the transparency that we have with these step increases and things, I think should give all of us confidence to say, yeah, we're gonna get there. We can't get there on day one. So if that being said, I appreciate everything that you've said and you've done, and everything that the employees said and done. And I can't wait to get this process started in order to make sure that at our first budget meeting that I was at a year ago, we talked about trying to drive fairness into the payroll piece. I think this is the component, this is the piece that we can all look at and say, yep, you know what, we are working towards that fairness level, that we can make sure that everybody's being treated equally and fairly. Not necessarily equal. Fair is not always equal. Equitable. Yeah. I'm going to step that back and say equal is not necessarily, we need to treat it fair. Fair is not always equal.
You still have to deserve it.
Yeah, you gotta earn it. I mean, that's just it. You gotta earn it.
So I'm sure all of you are going, what's the next step? We didn't get to see everything. Well, not everything is complete. Okay. So the next steps, board, next week, our regular meeting. We need to decide whether we're going to average or 68%. That will be the next step to move this process. Okay, so we're going to accept what Beth has proposed. I'm strongly encouraging we accept and then determine which one we're going. Okay. After that, then Beth, once we as a board give direction, then Beth and Lisa will then continue to work on putting each employee on a step. All right?
Yeah.
And Beth will, and then relay that. Yes. Then though, that information will then go out to department heads. Okay? Department heads are going to see, and electeds are going to see the steps first before they're sent out to employees. There will be a small window, department heads and electeds, because we need to be able to use this for budget. Okay? This is the whole timeline thing. We wanted to get this done so that we can have it for our budget, so we don't have this issue this next budget cycle. You'll get that back. Then employees. you will receive from HR. Okay, once your department head has already seen it. The employees will then receive a letterhead where they're stepped and where they're at, okay? So that will be for the next budget cycle. All right? That makes sense. I know that sounds, but there's process. Like every government thing, it doesn't happen just like this. So I know that everybody wanted to be able to see the steps, and I want to know all this. No, I will say, your department heads and electeds, for those employees that are wondering, they have seen some information. They've seen the minimums and the maximums. They had a window. They came back. They said, "Hey, yep, I'm in agreement with this," or they had questions or whatever it may be. Okay.
I think it's important to note that whichever one we decide will be the best for Marion County, but nobody losing.
Correct. Nobody's listening. Okay. But I know everybody wants to know, and everybody's like, "Okay, well, I was really hoping I would have the final answer." You don't have the final answer. Okay. Let's see. Please also remember that Beth will, once we get this piece done, then it'll be job descriptions. Policies implemented. There will be policies. To be able to do a structure like this, there's going to have to be changes in the policy. All right, and those policies will be updated through the handbook.
Which is technically what we going to consider phase 2. Is that correct?
Well, the phase 2 is the job description, but Beth has been helping us because we have to have policy updates when you do a salary study like this. And where does it end? Once you do a salary study, this is ongoing. All right, you just don't do one salary study and then you're done. This has to be continued. All right, so it's not going to be next year, but I would say within a 3 to 5 year range, we're going to have to hire outside person like Beth with Austin Peters Group, come back in and say, "All right, yeah." Now it shouldn't be as much work.
It's not nearly as expensive
Okay.
either. You're asking for a refresher at that point. You're wanting to know, how did we do the last 3 years? So
That is if the local governments are still in business.
I'm believing. So that's pretty much what I have for today. Beth, I am grateful. I'm happy to see that it wasn't as a big as steps. I mean, even the average or the 60th percentile, it's not that big of a bite. And so I think that we're being respectful to our constituents. Right? We're trying to do what's best and be able to retain, but also be respectful to them. So I'm very thankful. And that's pretty much it. Unless board, you guys have any other questions for Beth? We probably will not see, Beth won't be presenting again. This was her one time to present to us. And so we will make that decision next week on the average of the 60th percentile. And then she will go back working behind the scenes again.
Very impressed with your work.
thank you so much. Thank you.
Board, if there's no further questions.
Do we get a chance to ask questions? But,
Yeah, Jason, what were you needing?
so one of the questions that I have in regards to the 429,000, 467,000. That's this year's cost to kind of implement the study. Is that correct?
For the next budget cycle.
Yeah, 2026. Do we know what the cost will be for the county in 2027? We should probably be able to figure that number out on what that is. What is, I'm assuming it's gonna cost more to get to the 60th percentile this year. Next year, that cost won't be quite as high, is that correct?
You'll be able to project once you decide what.
Yes,
you're
once
gonna do.
What you're at
Yep.
to know where that is?
Yep.
And do we know in the long term, as the three of you, for taxpayers are gonna wanna know, if we implement this, what's it gonna cost the county? Or what's it gonna save the county over a 14 or 15-year step system? Can we predict that also? Beth, is that?
I don't think you'd be able to predict that because you don't know if you didn't have it, what would
CPI.
it be?
But I mean, on just the general, the percentage wise, I think you would be able to, you aren't gonna be able to tell the CPI side, but is there a long term? I mean, I'm assuming people have that as constituents
So we
or.
probably just go back to historical and say, okay, on an average, county government payroll has always gone
Would
up
have
X
been
percentage.
that.
And then extrapolate from that, because otherwise you just don't know. You know, what
CPI.
employees are getting increases, where they're at, who you're hiring.
But
You know, if you're
I guess,
hiring a high level person versus, you know, a lower skill level person, that's gonna have a big
I guess the
impact on that.
question I'm asking is, we can kind of know as, or as department heads, what it will be, right? In the long.
Ultimately, this to me is being responsible.
Right.
This is showing, hey, where we're at in the trajectory, but also it is, this is why cities and other counties are doing this. And actually, in the Doge report, this was something that the governor is suggesting. That you go back and you start doing some sort of salary study. So it's not all over the place. Because we as a board are kind of caught in the middle and it's kind of whoever's gonna holler the loudest. Well, now we have the study to back us and say, no, we're gonna follow the study. So,
Right, yeah, I was just curious. to know.
and that helps the constituents, that helps the.
It's a fair question, but
Yeah.
without knowing where we'd be without the study, it's hard to develop that comparable. So, I mean,
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
It's-
Beth, I have a clarifying question. The 429 and 467, does that include an anticipated inflation number or cost of living for July 1 of 2026? Or is that 4.7 and 5.1% increase in addition to
No,
on coming
that
July?
included.
That
everything.
includes, so
July
really we may,
1st.
you know, if it's 2.1 or 3, it would be maybe another 2 or 3% on top of
No, so what she said.
that. So as I'm starting to put my budget together, I kind of have an idea now,
That's a great question.
regardless of
That's a
what you
very good
got.
point.
Yeah. And for clarity, Beth, could you go to the mic and make sure so that everybody, and so Tyler was asking.
Yeah.
On the 60th percentile or the average, that what is it, 429 or 4?
Yeah, so the question is, am I gonna have to take this amount and adjust it for July 1st, is your question? And the answer is no, we're projecting forward to July 1st. This is inclusive of where you will need to be. So you'll get a dollar amount, I hope it's a great budget process for you. You'll know exactly where you need to budget, so,
all in them.
yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, thank you guys. No further questions, entertain motion to close the session.
So move.
Or
McCombs. Aye. Mueller.
Aye.
Johnner.
Hi. Entertain motion to adjourn.
move to adjourn.
Second. McCombs. Aye. Mueller.
Aye.
Johnner.
Hi.